Hey guys, hope you're well. So, uh, what seems like the volume's been turned up in light of the Paris attacks and the refugee crisis in regards to talk about Islam. It's gone into another gear, and one of the problems I see is that there are some leftists who still really don't seem to have gotten what a lot of people who ex-Muslim or new atheists have understood, and even right wingers have understood, far right wingers have understood, is that there's a problem within the ideology of Islam's congruence with Western culture, or just even not Western necessarily Western values, just values of humanist values like free thought, scientific inquiry, egalitarianism, and secularism. And there's a problem simultaneously with ethno-religious enclaves or communities that are Muslim based. There's a problem with these two things. The first one is, as I said, the incongruence of the ideology of Islam with values such as egalitarianism, secularism, free thought. Because Islam is an ideology, traditional normative Islam. And I just want to say though, not every Muslim is traditional normative Islam, or a lot of Muslims seem to take the personal aspects of the religion, like they personally use it to guide their conduct in life, but they don't use it for to guide their thoughts on the political process. And evidence of this is in the UK, at least, you've got a lot of Muslims who are conservative. I used to be a Muslim. I knew these people. They're conservative, but when it comes to politics, they run for left wing parties. They're Liberal Democrats or they're Labour. They run for left wing policies. So it's quite interesting mix. But yeah, they're conservative in their personal life and in their families and their communities, but in politics, they're left wing, which is quite interesting. And so yeah, so just because someone's a normative Muslim doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be right wing. But the ones who are right wing is due to the politics within the Islamic religion. So normative is traditional Islam. Not talking ISIS. I'm not talking Boko Haram. I'm talking traditional Islam. I'm talking the four schools of thought and the Salafi school, and include that in it. They believe in the death penalty or imprisonment for blasphemy, apostasy, homosexuality, adultery. They believe in the flogging of people who are or drunk or what's the word? Have sex outside marriage. They believe in slavery. Slavery is legal. You can make captive slaves, or you can have pre-existing, or people who are pre-existing slaves can be brought. Slavery is legal. Right. So, under a caliphate, in the ideal form of government, if all the conditions are met, those things are implemented. Those things are punishments, and the chop, of course, are chopping. Everyone knows chopping off the hands of thieves. That's people who believe that and believe that's the ideal form of government are a threat. Not necessarily saying it's not necessarily they're trying to actively bring it about. Like they're not necessarily Islamic jihadists who want to kill people and bring it about in the country. They're not necessarily people like Sharia for Britain or Sharia for France or Sharia for Belgium. All these groups exist that are actively trying to campaign to change the laws in Britain, and actually trying to encourage Muslims to fight to change the laws in Britain. They're not Hizb ut-Tahrir who necessarily trying to overthrow governments in Muslim majority countries. They're not necessarily like that, but they just believe that it would be nice if there's a Muslim majority population in the UK or abroad or whatever countries, that they form a caliphate. That's what they believe. Those people still are a threat uh, to society because they believe in an ideology that is not congruent with egalitarianism and secularism. And what tends to accompany these political thoughts is a belief in they do not like non-heterosexuals. They have a misogynistic, but they have a sense of male chauvinism, and they believe that certain ideas shouldn't be criticized. If you criticize Islam, or if you engage in satire or reductio ad absurdum, which is a legitimate form of argument. If you engage in any if you associate humor with any criticism of Islam, they believe there should be laws against it and these kind of things. There's a MP who was saying that he would vote for a Muslim MP who was saying he'd be open to voting for blasphemy laws recently in the UK. And so this ideology, and Muslims who are right wing and have these kind of right wing beliefs are are not congruent egalitarianism, secularism, and humanist thought in general. And when I mean humanism, I'm talking secular, or I'm talking, you can be religious humanist, just the values that I've already said: free thought, scientific inquiry, egalitarianism, secularism. They're not congruent. So I believe it's important to criticize an ideology and Muslims. If and when I say Muslims, I'm not saying all Muslims hold these views. I'm talking about the particular Muslims who express these views. I believe it's very, very important to criticize these people and criticize them thoroughly. And the reason why I believe that is because nothing's promised. We're not promised tomorrow. You know, you can get a phone call right now and your whole life gets turned upside down. A society can change, civilizations can change. Just because we've become accustomed to a certain values being a dominating society and a certain standard of living doesn't mean it's necessarily going to continue. Things can change. History has shown things can change. If you read, I'm currently reading a book about world history at the moment, and you see the rapid changes of things. Well, not rapid. You just see how things change over time. How certain beliefs that were once controlled, that were not controlled, or influence the direction of society are overthrown when people come in, or there's some kind of another ideology becomes dominant and things change. Nothing's promised. I think there's an attitude of a lot of leftists, I think, and a lot of millennials, is that, you know, who grew up in an egalitarian society, that things are always going to be this way, things will never regress or change. And the only reason why things got this way is because people fought, because the LGBT community fought for recognition of people who were not who were trans or not heterosexual, because the suffragettes, and I don't like third wave feminism. I respect first and second. That campaign for the vote, for rights to vote, and campaign for equal rights and opportunities in terms of employment and social rights. And it's only because civil rights movements took place in different parts, like in America and also in South Africa and Gandhi as well. That, you know, it's only because of these reasons that ethnic minorities were given in certain societies were given equal rights, at least in law, even if not necessarily in treatment in certain societies, at least in law. So it was only a fight, it was a struggle, and I believe these things need to be defended because they're only recent. That was literally like the 20th century that we developed a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Civil Rights Acts came into place, and women's rights came into place, and non-heterosexual and trans rights came into place. It's literally the last century. We're 15 years into this century, in this last century. So I think these things are very important. These things need to be defended and defended thoroughly. And people who, and ideologies or individuals who go against egalitarianism and secularism need to be challenged. I think it's very, very important to do these things. And that's one of the problems I have with the left. What the left seems to do, a lot of leftists, not all, seem to they seem to realize that pluralism is a part of is necessary for egalitarianism. So you need to have a sense of, you know, people can have different viewpoints and different perspectives, and people have the right to have different perspectives, and that needs to be a part. They recognize pluralism needs to be a part of culture. They realize that, and it seems to be what they've done. They've mistakenly put pluralism above egalitarianism in terms of defense, when not really realizing in order for egalitarianism to continue to exist, you need to have pluralism tempered by a promotion of pluralism or respect for pluralism, tempered by egalitarianism. And if there's an ideology, or if there are ethno-religious communities that are against egalitarianism, then they need to be challenged. Not just simply respected. Well, I respect your right to have a different opinion. If somebody believes that, fucking gay people should be killed, please challenge them on that opinion. Don't just be like, well, respect your right to your opinion. I mean, it's different if somebody says, I don't really like gay people, don't really like being around them. That's a different thing. That's if somebody's just saying, I don't like them, that's something different than saying, I believe they should be killed, or I believe somebody blasphemes should be killed or imprisoned, or I believe slavery is all right. There's a difference of degree. It's not just because somebody holds, that's what I believe. There's a vast difference of degree, right? So that's one of the problems I see with the left, is they don't seem to stand firm. They don't seem to protect. They don't seem to want to defend humanist values, which are responsible for the reason why we have the quality of life we have, the reason why we have the certain society we have. It's because people defend these things. And what you're doing by criticizing people who criticize Islam, or calling people, or immediately calling people racist to try and shut down a debate, or smearing people, is you're protecting the religious right. Because I guarantee that most people who are not far right, at least, people who are like new atheists, ex-Muslims who are criticizing the ideology of Islam, or criticizing particular Muslims who hold right-wing views, you're by not defending them, by what you're doing is you're harming those people who are doing it. You're harming people like myself. You're harming people, and this isn't something personal, but you're harming people who are trying to defend egalitarianism, the things that you say you support, the things that the right, the equal rights and equal dignity for everybody, the kind of culture that you say you want. You're harming people who are trying to protect that, because they're trying to protect that from the Muslim religious rights, from Muslim religious right, from the Islamic religious right. So if you're leftist, please think about that. Okay, the next point I was going to go into was the problem that the leftists seem to ignore too, and if you talk about this, they call you racist, is the problem of ethno-religious communities. The problem within Europe especially. In Europe, in the UK, I'm an ex-Muslim, I'll tell you, and this is true for, I've heard exactly the same perspective voiced by converts, people who were not the dominant ethnicity of the community. They say exactly the same thing, that by design, there are Muslim ethnic groups within the UK that by design try to exclude other ethnicities. They try to exclude other cultures, the influence of other cultures. They're not interested in adopting the mainstream culture into their culture or into their lives. They're not interested in that, or they want to protect their particular Islam, and they want to protect the culture that is correlated historically with their ethnicity. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se, but the problem is when they don't want to adopt the mainstream culture. And you ask why that's a problem? I've just explained why, because the mainstream culture is egalitarian and secular, and these Islamic ideology, traditional Islamic ideology at least, is not egalitarian and it's not secular. It doesn't believe in free thought, and in some cases it can be against scientific education, such as teaching of evolution. And the ethnic communities, and normally there's a mix of two, these two do mix together, is that a lot of the ethnic communities are not egalitarian. They have a sense of male chauvinism and misogyny, of homophobia, of transphobia, of believing in creation, teaching creationism and things like this to kids, and something I consider child abuse, which is getting children to visualize torture, hell, the doctrine of hell. Right, that's you're teaching children to visualize torture, to visualize their potential torture. I think that's child abuse. If I sat down and said to you, hey, if I sat down outside the context of religion, and I come up to somebody and just said, hey, really think about your suffering. Think about somebody pouring boiling oil down your throat and you screaming and them showing absolutely no mercy for you. Just think about that and sit down. I said that to your child, you would call me crazy. You may even call the police. Some people want to punch my face in. That's exactly what's going on in Muslim communities. They're teaching kids to visualize hell. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that there's a concerted effort by the elders in the community, and the elders traditionally have in the cultures, in the ethnic cultures, have given a lot of respect in terms of how to direct society, how to direct the community at least, and they often have the most money because they've been around longer. They've accumulated more wealth, so they have most money to set things up in mosques and community centres, so they can decide the course of things. If you put the money in, you can you have influence on how things are directed. And what they tend to do is they bring in imams from their particular ethnicity, from the native country of their particular ethnicity, and they bring them over, and they don't speak a word of English. And in the South Asian communities, you see they come over and they only speak Urdu, they only speak Gujarati, and they deliver sermons in Gujarati and Urdu. And it's same in Arab communities, and not just picking on South Asians, same in Arab communities, Arab Muslim communities, same in Somali Muslim communities, the same in Turkish Muslim communities, and this is all in the UK. And I realized when I started watching videos and listening to other people speaking, it's exactly the same in other parts of Europe. It's exactly the same in France, exactly the same in Sweden, and exactly the same in Belgium, and it's soon to be soon to be exactly the same in Germany, because they're bringing in, apparently, estimates by the end of it will be hundreds of thousands of immigrants, and they're going to have exactly the same thing. And the problem with these communities is as I said, they're not interested in adopting certain aspects of the culture, which I'm going to flat out say are superior to anything else. Egalitarianism is superior to any other value, in terms of believing in a feudal system or believing in a patriarchal system, whatever. Is superior. Believing in a society like perhaps the cultures exist, like places like Jamaica, where homosexuals subject to verbal and physical abuse, even fucking killed just for openly being gay. These egalitarian culture is superior. Secular culture is superior to a theocracy. Free thought is superior to restrictions on free inquiry and debates and satire and mockery, and protecting status quo and certain ideologies from scrutiny. I believe scientific inquiry is superior to quite relying on a religious faith or creationism, things like this. I believe these things are superior. Flat out, unapologetically say that. And you're dealing with communities that are not interested in adopting these superior values. And it's a problem because you're depriving, even if the adults make that choice, a conscious choice, you're depriving the children from these special values. You're depriving the minorities within the minority communities from safety, from dignity. You're depriving the non-heterosexuals, perhaps the trans. You're depriving the Muslims, children, and people who want scientific education. You're depriving them from not having their life governed by certain rules they may not agree with, but by protecting their community from any kind of outside influence, any influence of the mainstream culture. They're shielding them from perhaps questioning the beliefs, or finding some sense of empowerment, or finding people, or or developing a culture in which they're loved, in a culture in which they're protected. So I firmly mean this, and this is not just propaganda. I genuinely believe the people who are most harmed by these ethno-religious communities and Islam in general are Muslims themselves. Or what if somebody wants to leave the religion, but they're trapped in these enclaves? And that's what happens. There are Muslims, there are ex-Muslims. I remember I used to go on this ex-Muslim forum. There are ex-Muslims who are pretending, in the UK, pretending that they're still Muslim because they fear being ostracized by their community. They fear being ostracized by their family. They even fear violence in some cases. And the reason why they fear it is because the culture within these enclaves, the culture within these communities is not egalitarian. It's not I respect you regardless of your belief or lack of belief. Their cultures are only respect you if you have a certain belief. And what you're having is this enclave toxic culture. Okay, so as I said, this is the same in France, in Sweden, in Belgium, and the UK, and soon to be in Germany. And if you don't challenge these things, you're leaving certain minorities within these minority communities to just be victim to the prejudice and to the violence and to the dysfunction within those communities. And it can spread too, because they believe in dawah, which is spreading Islam and encouraging other people to become Muslims, and you're spreading, you're fostering a culture that can give birth to jihadism. And the reason is because if you don't identify with the mainstream culture, what tends to protect people from violence is a sense of common humanity. When you see somebody as essentially sharing the same needs as you, essentially sharing the same basic humanity as you, you're a lot less inclined to kill them. When you dehumanize somebody, that's when it's very, very easy to be violent towards them. That's it. I'll just say, I wasn't going to go into example, but I won't. If you see somebody as less than human, if you just see them as another species almost, something other than you, it's very, very easy to advocate their killing or become indifferent or their violence against them. And that's what you're fostering, because this is a community, these ethno-religious communities foster a sense of in-group and out-group. So anyway, let me look at the time. Time's almost up. What I'm saying is, if you're left and you really believe in humanist values and you want to protect them, then please understand that the people who are not right wing and are criticizing Islam are not necessarily racist. They're not necessarily supporters of U.S. foreign policy or Western foreign policy or coalition foreign policy. They're not necessarily right wing. They're not even necessarily Christian or anything like this. They're just people who genuinely believe in egalitarianism and secularism and free thought and scientific inquiry, and they want to protect them. And they generally have compassion, as I do, have compassion for religious minorities. And something else I just want to say, this is another problem with the refugee community, is that the German police chief came out and said that there's problems with Muslim majority refugees attacking religious minorities, attacking the Yazidis and other refugees and Christian refugees. And he's actually said what we need to do is separate them when we house them. You need to separate them on the basis of religion. There's already a problem within the refugee camps. Exactly the problem I've just spoken to you about. It's already manifesting itself in the refugee camps in Germany. And it's going to spread to Germany. And if you don't stand and have a firm boundaries and say this is not okay, and insist on the adoption of egalitarianism and insist on the adoption of those principles, then you are in danger of losing the civilization that we hold dear. And that may sound dramatic, but it's true. It's only last century that we had the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It's only last century we had women's rights, that we had lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights, that we had rights for ethnic minorities. It's only last century. So please defend it. Anyway, take care.